Hello, I thought video 10, the terrifying reality of generation ships. The terrifying reality of generation ships. Have you ever imagined living your entire life on a spaceship, knowing you will never see the planet your ancestors aimed for? In this video, we explore the chilling, fascinating, and scientifically grounded realities of generation ships, where human civilizations must survive centuries in isolation between the stars. From technological challenges, life support systems, and cosmic hazards, to psychological strain, governance dilemmas, and intergenerational responsibilities, you'll experience what it truly means to be part of a voyage that spans centuries. In this video, you'll learn why traveling to even the nearest stars requires multi-generational planning and extreme resource management, how humans adapt physically, socially, and psychologically to life in artificial, confined environments, the ethical and social dilemmas of reproduction, population control, and governance in space-bound civilizations, the potential risks upon arrival at distant planets, and how survival continues to challenge the first colonists. Disclaimer: portions of this video were produced using AI tools to illustrate concepts, generate visualizations, and provide educational storytelling. AI content is used purely for guidance, demonstration, and educational purposes, helping you understand complex interstellar concepts more clearly. About our channel: discover the universe before sleep uses calm narration, immersive storytelling, and scientific insights to help viewers relax while learning about the universe. Join our community and drift into space with knowledge and wonder. Generation ships, space exploration, interstellar travel video tags. The terrifying reality of generation ships, multi-generational space travel explained. Human survival in deep space, challenges of life on generation ships. Discover the universe before sleep, sleepy science, interstellar travel. Ethical dilemmas in space colonization, artificial life support and confined environments, traveling to other stars centuries long. Generation ships, risks and governance. Chapter 1. The terrifying reality of generation ships. What if you were born knowing that you would never set foot on the planet your ancestors dreamed of reaching? Imagine spending your entire life on a spaceship, a massive vessel hurtling through the void of interstellar space, where every breath you take, every heartbeat, every choice exists only to keep a fragile chain of life going for generations you will never meet. That is the terrifying reality of generation ships, human civilizations designed to survive centuries-long voyages to stars we cannot yet reach. And tonight, we're going to confront the science, the risks, and the unsettling truths about these voyages. If you've ever looked up at the night sky, wondering what lies beyond, this video is for you. Not just for curious minds, but for anyone who has ever felt the pull of the unknown, the urge to explore, to survive, to leave a mark on a universe that doesn't wait. Today, we're diving into the harsh, often invisible realities that make generation ships both awe-inspiring and terrifying. Before we start, take a moment to like this video. It's a small gesture, but it helps more people find this story and explore the mysteries of space with us. Now, let's set the stage. You wake up in a world where the walls around you are all that you will ever know. There is no horizon, no forests, no oceans. The ship is miles long, spinning slowly to generate artificial gravity. Your grandparents launched from Earth decades before you were born. You will live, work, fall in love, raise children, and die, all without ever stepping foot on the planet this journey is aiming for. And your children, their children, will continue the journey long after you are gone. Why does humanity even consider such a journey? The nearest star, Proxima Centauri, lies 24 light-years away. That's roughly 25 trillion miles. Our fastest spacecraft today, moving at about 36.0 miles per hour, would take over 80 years to get there. Even theoretical nuclear pulse propulsion fusion rockets or laser-driven light sails could reduce travel times to a few centuries, but even then, the journey far exceeds a human lifespan. which means we need generations. People born, living, then dying aboard a vessel that must sustain life without resupply for hundreds of years. The stakes are staggering. Accelerating a vessel capable of supporting 1.0 people to just 1% of light speed would require energy beyond the total annual production of the Earth today. Every system, air, water, food, waste recycling, must function flawlessly. One system failure could threaten hundreds, maybe thousands of lives. And all of this is before we even consider the psychological, social, and ethical challenges of living for centuries in a closed, isolated environment. Throughout this video, we'll explore the engineering impossibilities and solutions proposed for long-term interstellar travel, the psychological and social challenges faced by multi-generational crews, the ethical dilemmas of population control, genetic health, and the ultimate risk, arriving at a distant star only to find the planet inhospitable, or even worse, obsolete due to advances on Earth. By the end of this journey, you'll understand why generation ships are not just a technological challenge, but a profound experiment in humanity itself, testing our endurance, morality, and adaptability. And perhaps you'll also ask yourself a difficult question. If you had the choice, would you board a generation ship, knowing you may never see the destination, and commit your life and your descendants' lives to a centuries-long gamble across the star? So settle in, relax, and let your mind drift into the vastness of space. The stars are waiting, and the journey is about to begin. Chapter 2: Life aboard the generation ship. Imagine waking up to the hum of machinery instead of birdsong, the glow of artificial lights instead of sunrise, and the curve of a metallic horizon instead of endless landscapes. This is life aboard a generation ship, where the walls of the vessel are the only boundaries you have ever known. Unlike any spacecraft in history, these ships are not designed for hours or days, but for centuries of continuous human life, a self-contained world spinning slowly through the void. Every aspect of existence, the air you breathe, the water you drink, the food you eat, is recycled, monitored, and controlled. There is no resupply from Earth. There is no chance to step outside, to walk on soil, to feel rain. And yet, thousands of people live, love, and die here, generation after generation, all bound to a mission they never chose. The first challenge is scale. A ship must accommodate enough people to sustain genetic diversity and social stability over centuries. Experts estimate that a minimum population of 500 to 1.0 is necessary, though larger populations of several thousand reduce the risk of catastrophic genetic bottlenecks and social collapse. That means agricultural sections, water purification systems, life support networks, schools, hospitals, workshops, and even recreational areas must fit within a confined structure that must endure centuries of wear and tear. Imagine corridors that stretch for miles, living quarters that must house families in small, shared spaces, and artificial gravity generated through rotation, a force calculated precisely to keep human bodies functional over generations. Even minor errors in rotation speed could wreak havoc on circulation, bone density, and muscle development, compounding the physiological challenges of life in space. Yet the technological hurdles are only part of the story. Human psychology becomes a central concern. Isolation, monotony, and the knowledge that your life is just a link in a chain stretching hundreds of years create profound mental strain. Social bonds are fragile. Conflict can arise over limited resources, personal grievances, or differing visions of the mission. Maintaining purpose across generations is a constant struggle. Leaders must balance authority with inclusivity, technical expertise with democratic participation, and stability with flexibility, all while anticipating generations of people who never asked to be here. Education is another cornerstone of survival. Every child must learn the skills necessary to maintain the ship: engineering, biology, medicine, environmental systems, even crisis management. Knowledge cannot be lost, or failures will compound. Yet teaching is complicated by cultural drift. Languages evolve, priorities shift, and skills that were once critical may be undervalued by future generations. Recreation and culture are surprisingly vital. Without opportunities to engage in art, music, games, or even virtual reality experiences, morale plummets. Humans need stimulation, novelty, and purpose. Life aboard a generation ship is an intricate balancing act, sustaining both body and mind, technology and society, while drifting through the emptiness between stars. And every decision matters. A single system failure, a social conflict, or a lapse in knowledge could ripple across decades, endangering thousands. As you close your eyes tonight, consider this. Life aboard a generation ship is a microcosm of civilization itself, magnified over centuries, tested against isolation, confinement, and the unforgiving expanse of space. Here, every heartbeat is essential, every choice counts, and the journey is as much about sustaining humanity as it is about reaching the stars. Chapter 3. The technological impossibility of interstellar travel. The first barrier to a generation ship is pure physics. Space is vast beyond comprehension. Even the closest star system, Proxima Centauri, lies over 4 light years away. That's 25 trillion miles. To cross that distance in a human lifetime is impossible with current technology. Even theoretical propulsion methods, from nuclear pulse drives to fusion engines and laser-propelled light sails, only reduce travel times to centuries. To sustain a human population over these temescals, the ship must be self-sufficient, recycling everything from oxygen and water to food, and producing energy indefinitely. Consider energy alone, accelerating a mass large enough to carry 0 people to even 1% of light speed requires energy on a scale greater than the annual global output of Earth today. Shielding is equally critical. Space is not empty. Micrometeoroids, cosmic rays, and interstellar dust travel at relativistic speeds. A collision with even a tiny particle could be catastrophic, releasing energy equivalent to explosives. Multi-layered shielding is necessary, often integrating water, polyethylene, and structural metal to absorb impacts and radiation. Each layer adds mass, compounding the energy requirements. Closed-loop life support is another challenge. Every molecule of oxygen and water must be recovered and reused. Plants, hydroponic farms, algae bioreactors, and chemical scrubbers work in concert. But a failure in any component can cascade into disaster. Imagine the oxygen recycler breaking down within days. People die from hypoxia. Food production is equally precarious. Crops must be grown year-round under artificial lighting, with pests, disease, and nutrient deficiencies controlled entirely on board. Waste must be converted back into usable resources. No external resupply exists. The ship also ages. Metals fatigue under stress, electronics fail, seals crack, and moving parts wear. Materials degrade with each recycling loop. After decades, even small imperfections accumulate, leading to unpredictable failures. And the technology itself becomes obsolete. By the time the ship is halfway to its destination, Earth might have developed superior propulsion, life support, or energy systems, innovations the crew cannot access. Maintaining, repairing, and eventually innovating within the limits of the original design is critical. 3D printing, on-board machine shops, and stored raw materials must supply replacements for centuries. But nothing is perfect. Failures are inevitable. All of this occurs while the ship drifts through the emptiness of space, with no second chances. A generation ship is not merely a vehicle, it is a fragile ecosystem, a technological marvel, and a ticking time bomb. Every system, every material, every procedure must be perfect, yet perfection over centuries is nearly impossible. Chapter 4. The ethics and social dilemmas of long-term space travel. Beyond the technical challenges, generation ships pose profound ethical and social dilemmas. The very concept asks individuals to live entire lives in confinement, never reaching the destination their ancestors chose. This raises immediate questions about autonomy. Is it morally acceptable to force future generations into a mission they did not consent to? And yet, without multiple generations, interstellar travel becomes impossible. Population management is critical. Too few births led to inbreeding, genetic bottlenecks, and eventual extinction. Too many, and life support systems collapse. Some proposals suggest lotteries for reproduction, others merit-based systems considering genetic diversity, skill, and health. Each approach carries ethical risks. Who decides worthiness? How do you enforce rules without creating resentment, rebellion, or psychological harm? Social cohesion is equally delicate. The ship is a micro-society with thousands of people trapped together for centuries. Governance systems must balance technical expertise with social legitimacy. Should engineers and scientists rule by necessity, or should everyone have a voice? Concentrating authority in a technocratic elite risks creating resentment and passive resistance. Distributing power risks inefficiency and mission failure. Education becomes a cornerstone of survival. Every child must acquire critical skills in engineering, medicine, agriculture, and systems management. Knowledge loss is lethal. Yet education cannot be purely functional. Humans require meaning, culture, art, and social connection to thrive. Over centuries, these elements risk fading, replaced by utilitarian monotony, unless deliberately preserved. Psychological health is fragile. Isolation, monotony, and lack of autonomy contribute to depression, conflict, and disillusionment. Even a small percentage of the population suffering severe mental health issues can compromise maintenance, decision-making, and the mission itself. Religion, ideology, and culture offer potential cohesion, but can also create division. Generational drift may lead to disputes over beliefs, customs, or priorities, which can escalate into factionalism. Conflicts in a confined, self-sufficient environment are catastrophic, resources cannot be ignored, and every action has consequences. And finally, the ultimate ethical dilemma is survival versus sacrifice. Every life on the ship is both precious and instrumental. Individual desires must often be subordinated to collective needs. Yet this requirement to live, work, reproduce, and die for a mission you did not choose is profoundly burdensome. It forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about human purpose, sacrifice, and the cost of exploration. In short, generationships are not merely engineering problems. They are sociological, psychological, and ethical crucibles, testing our ability to govern, cooperate, and preserve humanity across centuries in a hostile and unforgiving universe. Chapter 5: Survival and Resource Management in Space Life aboard a generation ship is defined by resource scarcity and perpetual survival challenges. Every drop of water must be reclaimed, every calorie of food grown, harvested, and recycled, and every ounce of energy carefully monitored. The closed ecosystem of the ship leaves no margin for error. Hydroponic farms and algae retorts provide nourishment, but crops fail, pests emerge, and nutrient cycles degrade over time. A single miscalculation in oxygen production or water recycling could create a crisis affecting hundreds of people. Energy management compounds the challenge. Propulsion, life support, lighting, and climate control require constant input, yet fuel and power storage are finite. Nuclear reactors and battery systems must be maintained meticulously, with backups for every critical system. Engineers work tirelessly to prevent failure, but machinery ages. Metals fatigue, seals wear, electronics malfunction. Even with advanced 3D printing and onboard fabrication, replacement parts degrade after multiple cycles of reuse. Population growth must be carefully regulated. Too many children strain the life support system, to few risk genetic bottlenecks and eventual extinction. Systems of birth control, lotteries, or merit-based reproduction may enforce limits, but enforcing compliance creates psychological tension. Every decision has cascading effects. A mismanaged food supply can lead to malnutrition, decreased cognitive function, and social unrest. The crew must also manage waste. Human and agricultural waste is converted back into water, nutrients, and usable materials. Any contamination, mechanical failure, or biological imbalance can trigger disease outbreaks or system collapse. Long-term survival requires constant vigilance, cooperation, and redundancy across all critical systems. The psychological toll is immense. Knowing that one error could imperil hundreds or thousands for centuries creates persistent stress. The ship's governance structures, engineering teams, and social hierarchies must function flawlessly. Every generation inherits not only the physical ship but also the responsibility to maintain a delicate balance of resources, skills, and knowledge. Failure is not an option. There is no rescue, no resupply, no chance to return to Earth. Even minor mistakes compound over decades, and small inefficiencies in resource allocation may escalate into catastrophic shortages. Generational continuity depends on rigorous training, disciplined maintenance, and strict adherence to protocols. Trust, social cohesion, and a shared sense of purpose become as essential as any mechanical system. The survival of thousands of people depends on maintaining this fragile equilibrium for hundreds of years, against the relentless and indifferent backdrop of interstellar space. Chapter 6. The psychological challenges of confinement. Humans are not designed for isolation on the scale required by a generation ship. The psychological environment aboard is as critical as the mechanical one, and often more fragile. Generations live and die within the same artificial walls, their entire social universe limited to a few thousand individuals. Monotony, confinement, and the knowledge that your life exists only as a link in a centuries-long mission create profound stress. Early generations may maintain morale by remembering Earth, by storytelling, rituals, and shared culture, but over centuries, connections to the home planet fade. Cultural drift alters language, values, and priorities. New generations are born into a life they did not choose, often struggling to find purpose. Depression, anxiety, and social tension become persistent threats. Leadership must balance strict maintenance of the mission with emotional support for the crew. Conflict is inevitable. Disputes over resources, privileges, or ideology can escalate dangerously in a confined environment. Even small grievances persist longer because there is no escape. Recreation becomes a critical tool for psychological stability. Simulated environments, virtual reality, arts, music, and sports provide stimulation, social bonding, and emotional releases. Yet these activities compete with the finite space, energy, and time needed for survival tasks, creating constant trade-offs. Education serves a dual role, transmitting essential technical skills and providing purpose, engagement, and mental stimulation. Apprenticeships, interactive learning, and mentorship ensure knowledge continuity, while also fostering self-worth and identity. The interplay of stress, monotony, and purpose defines the social atmosphere. One person's despair can ripple through families and work groups, eroding productivity and social cohesion. Generations must develop resilience, trust, and a shared sense of mission. Psychological failures may manifest as apathy, sabotage, or rebellion. Mental health professionals, counselors, and community structures become essential components of the ship's ecosystem, as critical as water, oxygen, or food. Maintaining this delicate balance across centuries requires foresight, cultural continuity, and adaptive leadership. The human mind, confined yet endlessly creative, must be nurtured, challenged, and supported to prevent the collapse of both individuals and society. In this way, the generation ship becomes a living laboratory of human endurance, testing not only engineering but the limits of the mind itself, as generations navigate the unforgiving reality of interstellar isolation. Chapter 7. Governance and leadership across centuries. The survival of a generation ship hinges not only on technology and resources but also on effective governance and leadership. Unlike any earthly society, this is a civilization confined within a spacecraft, with no external oversight, no recourse, and no escape. The first generation establishes the political and social framework, but every subsequent generation inherits it without ever choosing it. Command structures must balance technical expertise, democratic legitimacy, and social cohesion. Engineers and specialists may have the knowledge necessary to maintain life support systems, propulsion, and navigation, but concentrating authority solely in their hands risks alienating the broader population. Conversely, granting equal voice to all without regard for technical competency could jeopardize the mission. Leadership must also manage conflict, resource allocation, and reproduction policies. Population control is a particularly sensitive domain. Birth lotteries, merit-based permits, or health-based restrictions may be implemented to sustain genetic diversity and life support stability. Yet enforcing these rules without fostering resentment is a constant challenge. Discontent can spark passive resistance or active rebellion, threatening both lives and critical systems. Succession planning is critical. Generations come and go, and leaders must train successors who understand not only technical systems but also the social fabric of the ship. Education, mentorship, and ritualized authority help maintain continuity. Yet over centuries, cultural drift may erode respect for inherited structures. Governance also faces ideological pressures. Religious or philosophical movements may emerge, offering purpose and cohesion but potentially conflicting with mission priorities. Tensions between faith and science, tradition and innovation, or personal desires and collective needs can destabilize society. A failure to balance these dynamics could result in factionalism, sabotage, or even civil conflict with catastrophic consequences in a confined environment. Ethical dilemmas pervade every decision: who receives medical attention during crises, who is permitted to reproduce, how a descent is managed without creating long-term social fractures. Leaders must navigate these decisions while preserving trust, morale, and compliance. Transparency, fairness, and adaptability are essential, yet uncertainty and unforeseen circumstances will constantly test governance. In essence, running a generation ship is not merely about steering a vessel, it is about sustaining a human civilization in microcosm, preserving life, culture, knowledge, and purpose across centuries in isolation. The success of the mission is inseparable from the ability of leaders to manage both the machinery and the minds of generations. Chapter 8. Population Dynamics and Genetic Survival. Population dynamics aboard a generation ship are a matter of life and death. Maintaining genetic diversity across centuries is essential to prevent inbreeding, depression, hereditary diseases, and the eventual collapse of the population. Experts suggest that a minimum population of 500 is required, though larger numbers reduce genetic risk and provide redundancy in skills and knowledge. Each individual's reproductive rights are inevitably constrained by the collective survival imperative. Controlled reproduction may involve lotteries, merit-based systems, or carefully managed genetic pairing. Such measures ensure genetic health, but also generate ethical and social tension. Compliance is rarely complete, some may resist, and dissent can threaten both social cohesion and resource management. Genetic interventions, such as storing frozen embryos or using gene editing technologies, may be employed to preserve diversity and correct defects, but these interventions carry technical, ethical, and social challenges. Future generations may perceive such practices differently, potentially leading to conflict or cultural resistance. Birth rates must be finely balanced to match mortality and sustain population size without overburdening life support. A small miscalculation can have cascading effects over population strains, food, water, and oxygen system. Underpopulation increases the risk of genetic bottlenecks and skill shortages. Mortality itself is more complex than mere survival. Disease outbreaks, accidents, or resource scarcity can create sudden population decline, destabilizing society. Psychological and social implications are profound. Individuals may struggle with limitations on family size or the knowledge that personal choices are secondary to mission needs. Generational tension emerges as priorities shift and cultural norms evolve. Each generation must learn to internalize the mission's objectives while balancing personal fulfillment with collective survival. Education, healthcare, and social structures all intertwined with population management. Skilled personnel must be trained to replace predecessors, ensuring that critical systems remain operable. Knowledge loss is lethal. Every failure to transmit expertise or enforce population policies can endanger the entire ship. In this way, population dynamics are not simply a demographic problem, but a complex, multi-dimensional challenge, combining genetics, ethics, psychology, and social engineering. The ship is a living ecosystem where human biology, culture, and governance are inseparable, and the survival of generations depends on their careful equilibrium. Chapter 9: Education and Knowledge Transfer on a Generation Ship. Education is survival. Every child must learn not only to exist but to maintain the complex systems that sustain life. Engineering, biology, medicine, environmental control, and computer systems are core subjects. Failure to master these disciplines could doom the population. Education must extend beyond rote memorization. Students need to understand principles, troubleshoot unexpected problems, and innovate within the limitations of their environment. Apprenticeships, hands-on training, and mentorship are essential to transmit tacit knowledge that cannot be captured in manuals alone. Over centuries, language evolves, cultural norms shift, and technical terminology may drift. Manuals that made sense to the first generation may become cryptic to the 10th, threatening comprehension during critical emergency. Redundancy is key. Multiple people trained in every critical skill reduce the risk of catastrophic knowledge loss. Beyond technical skills, education must foster psychological resilience and social cohesion. Conflict resolution, communication, and leadership are as crucial as repairing life support systems. Students learn the values and ethics of living in a confined, interdependent society, where every decision has consequences that may affect hundreds or thousands of lives. Cultural education also matters. History, art, and literature preserve identity and purpose, preventing a purely utilitarian society that risks despair and apathy. Balance is delicate. Time spent on art and philosophy must not compromise technical competence, yet neglecting culture erodes morale. Motivation presents a unique challenge. In a society where career paths and roles are predetermined by ship needs, traditional incentives such as wealth, status, or social mobility are absent. Educators must foster intrinsic motivation and a sense of purpose, understanding that the survival of future generations depends on their efforts. Recognition, mentorship, communal projects, and ritualized ceremonies can reinforce the value of contributions. Failure to engage learners risks apathy, errors, and social friction. Over centuries, maintaining educational standards is a perpetual effort. Teachers must train successors, preserve curricula, and adapt to evolving technologies and knowledge gaps. A generation failing in this responsibility can imperil the ship, demonstrating that education is not just preparation for life aboard the vessel. It is the lifeblood of the mission itself. Every lesson learned, every skill acquired, every cultural practice maintained is a thread in the delicate web that sustains civilization within the void. Chapter 10: Recreation and Culture in Confinement. Life aboard a generation ship is defined not only by survival, but also by mental and emotional sustainability. Humans require stimulation, creativity, and connection, yet they are confined within metallic walls for lifetimes. recreation becomes an essential counterbalance to monotony, stress, and isolation. Virtual reality may simulate oceans, forests, and distant landscapes, offering sensory escape and psychological relief. Sports adapted to artificial or low gravity provide physical exercise, social bonding, and friendly competition. Art, music, and communal cultural activities maintain identity, inspire cooperation, and provide avenues for emotional expression. These activities are not mere entertainment, they are critical for morale and social cohesion. Without them, mental health deteriorates. Depression, apathy, and interpersonal tension threaten both individuals and mission-critical functions. However, space and resource constraints create trade-offs. Facilities for recreation, instruments, or cultural materials compete with living quarters, hydroponic farms, and technical infrastructure. Decisions must balance physical survival against psychological health. Generations will prioritize differently. One may emphasize engineering and maintenance, while the next may invest more in cultural richness. Leadership must navigate these changing values without undermining social cohesion or mission priorities. Rituals, storytelling, and ceremonies reinforce shared purpose and connect generations to the original mission, instilling a sense of belonging and legacy. Music, art exhibitions, theater performances, and interactive virtual experiences allow individuals to explore creativity and preserve cultural knowledges. Even small communities within the ship develop subcultures, creating micro-identities while remaining part of the larger social fabric. Recreation and culture are therefore not luxuries. They are strategic tools for sustaining a multi-generational civilization. They foster resilience, maintain mental health, and reinforce social bonds, ensuring that the generations who never chose this mission still find meaning, joy, and purpose in a life confined to a spaceship drifting between stars. Chapter 11. The Risks of Disease and Health Management. Aboard a generation ship, disease is a silent but relentless threat. The confined environment, unlimited population amplify risks that would be minor on Earth. Infectious diseases can spread rapidly, and medical resources are finite. Every doctor, nurse, and technician must be trained not only in treatment but in prevention, isolation procedures, and emergency care. Even minor infections can escalate into epidemics if not contained. Chronic illnesses and age-related conditions are equally concerning. A population with limited genetic diversity may experience high rates of hereditary disorders over generations. Life support systems themselves create health challenges. Air recycling can concentrate pathogens, water systems can harbor contaminants, and closed-loop agriculture may introduce allergens or toxins. Radiation exposure adds another layer of danger. Despite shielding, cosmic rays penetrate metal hulls, increasing cancer risks and potentially causing genetic mutations that affect future generations. Psychological stress also impacts physical health. Depression, anxiety, and social conflict weaken immune systems, reducing resilience to both infectious and chronic diseases. Preventative medicine becomes critical. Regular health screenings, vaccinations, and monitoring of genetic stability are essential to sustain the population. Medicine on a generation ship is limited by resources. Pharmaceuticals must be synthesized on board. Surgical procedures may rely on automated systems. And critical equipment must be repaired or replicated using onboard manufacturing. A single system failure in medical facilities can lead to cascading consequences, threatening not just individual lives, but the stability of the entire population. Nutrition is another key factor. Hydroponic and controlled environment crops must supply adequate vitamins, minerals, and calories. Deficiencies in diet can cause long-term health effects and reduce reproductive viability. Mental health care is equally critical. Chronic stress, isolation, and intergenerational trauma must be addressed through counseling, social support structures, and engagement in meaningful activities. The health of every individual is inextricably linked to the survival of the mission. A minor outbreak, untreated genetic disorder, or psychological crisis can ripple across generations, potentially jeopardizing the continuity of the human chain aboard the ship. In this environment, prevention, vigilance, and adaptability are not just good practices, they are the difference between survival and extinction. Chapter 12, Ethical Dilemmas and the Value of Individual Lives. Every decision aboard a generation ship carries profound ethical weight. Individual autonomy is constrained by necessity. Personal desires are often subordinate to the collective survival of the population. Who decides reproductive rights, resource allocation, or medical priorities? Birth permits may restrict family size, ensuring genetic diversity and resource sustainability, but such measures can create resentment, psychological distress, or social unrest. Genetic interventions to correct mutations or preserve diversity raise further questions. Who determines which traits are acceptable? And how are dissenting opinions managed? Over generations, beliefs and values evolve. Practices that were initially accepted may later be challenged, threatening cohesion. Leadership must balance fairness, social acceptance, and mission-critical objective. In emergencies, triage decisions become inevitable. Resources may need to be allocated to preserve those most essential to survival, yet this creates moral tension. Is it justifiable to prioritize one life over another, and who bears responsibility for these decisions? Psychological well-being and purpose are intertwined with ethics. Humans require meaning. The knowledge that their existence serves a mission they did not choose can generate both pride and despair. Cultural rituals, storytelling, and shared values aim to instill purpose, but they cannot eliminate the moral weight of restricted autonomy. Education, governance, and cultural practices all serve not just to maintain operational efficiency, but to justify ethically the impositions required by survival. Even under ideal conditions, tension persists between the collective good and individual rights. A generation ship is a floating ethical crucible. It tests our capacity to value life, distribute resources, and govern fairly under conditions of extreme confinement, limited options, and centuries-long consequences. Each choice reverberates for generations, illustrating that the survival of humanity across the stars is inseparable from our ability to navigate profound moral and ethical dilemmas. Chapter 13, Mission Drift and Cultural Evolution. Over centuries, the society aboard a generation ship is inevitably transformed. The original mission, meticulously planned on Earth, risks being forgotten, misinterpreted, or deprioritized by generations born mid-journey. Language evolves, rituals shift, and cultural norms diverge from their ancestral roots. The children of the first generation inherit a mission they did not choose, and their understanding of purpose is filtered through stories, education, and rituals that may emphasize different values than intended. This phenomenon, known as mission drift, is one of the most insidious threats to generational survival. Even a well-designed governance structure can gradually lose legitimacy as cultural evolution alters priorities. Perhaps early generations revered exploration and sacrifice, while later generations value comfort, stability, or autonomy more highly. These differences can create tension between leadership and the populace, potentially escalating into social unrest or rebellion. Cultural evolution also affects practical knowledge. Technical procedures, operational priorities, and emergency protocols may be de-emphasized or forgotten as new generations reinterpret their importance. Manuals and digital records help preserve information, but without experiential understanding, the crew may follow procedures mechanically, without grasping the underlying principles. This reduces flexibility and increases vulnerability to novel challenges, from system failures to unforeseen cosmic hazards. Rituals, art, and storytelling are tools to preserve a sense of mission, but they can also be reinterpreted, mythologized, or politicized. Religious or philosophical movements may emerge, providing cohesion but also generating factional conflict. Leaders must continually adapt to maintain the delicate balance between preserving the original mission and respecting evolving cultural identities. Psychologically, individuals struggle with existential questions. Is their life meaningful if they will never see the mission's end? How do they relate to a purpose defined centuries before their birth? These pressures influence compliance, morale, and social cohesion. In extreme cases, generations may choose to abandon or alter the mission, settling temporarily on asteroids, moons, or rogue planets encountered en route. Each deviation carries risk, loss of continuity, wasted resources, or collapse of critical system. The long-term survival of a generation ship is therefore as dependent on cultural management as it is on engineering. Maintaining identity, purpose, and social cohesion across centuries is a continuous effort requiring foresight, flexibility, and resilience. Mission Drift illustrates that human adaptation is both a strength and a threat, capable of preserving civilization, but also capable of undermining centuries of planning, if not carefully managed. Chapter 14: Arrival and the Challenges of Settlement. After centuries of travel, the generation ship finally reaches its destination, a star system with a potentially habitable planet. But arrival is only the beginning of new, unpredictable challenges. The first problem is physiological adaptation. Humans born in artificial or low-gravity environments experience weaker bones, reduced muscle mass, and altered cardiovascular systems. Descending to a planetary surface with Earth-like gravity can be physically painful or even incapacitating for some. Reproductive health, immune response, and endurance may be compromised, creating selective pressures that affect survival and long-term genetic stability. Second, the planetary environment itself is uncertain. Observations from light years away provide limited data. Atmospheric composition, surface temperature, and water presence can be inferred, but local hazards, allergens, pathogens, and extreme weather conditions cannot be fully predicted. Early settlers face exposure to microorganisms, environmental toxins, and terrain that requires adaptation and ingenuity. Third, social and logistical challenges arise immediately. The population may split between those eager to settle and those reluctant to leave the familiar confines of the ship. Resources, equipment, and personnel must be allocated to establish shelters, grow food, and build infrastructure while maintaining the ship for continued habitation or as a backup. Conflicts of interest emerge naturally. Ship dwellers prioritize preservation of the vessel and its systems. Planet settlers prioritize exploration and establishment. Cooperation is essential, yet fragile. Mismanagement can lead to casualties, infrastructure collapse, or the failure of the new colony. Additionally, ethical questions arise. What if the planet hosts native life forms? Is colonization justified if it displaces indigenous ecosystems? How are societal rules adapted from the ship to an environment with greater freedom and unpredictability? The very survival strategies that worked in a controlled ship environment may fail on a planetary surface. Success requires flexibility, resilience, and innovation, testing both the physical and social adaptations of generations raised entirely in space. Arrival does not erase the risks of centuries-long travel. It introduces new hazards and moral dilemmas that demand leadership, skill, and foresight. The generation ship's purpose, reaching and inhabiting a new world, is only realized if settlers can survive, adapt, and flourish in an environment far removed from the carefully controlled ecosystem of their vessel. Chapter 15: Technological Degradation and System Failures. Even if the generation ship arrives intact, the technology on board will have aged, presenting unique and unprecedented challenges. Systems designed to operate for centuries inevitably degrade. Metals fatigue under constant stress, seals, joints, and bearings weaken, electronics experience radiation-induced deterioration, and complex machinery suffers from wear accumulated over decades of operation. Every replacement part manufactured on board will be slightly inferior to the original due to material losses in recycling, accumulation of impurities, and limitations of fabrication processes. Over time, even minor inefficiencies compound, creating a fragile infrastructure. Life support systems are particularly vulnerable. Oxygen generation, water recycling, and nutrient production depend on continuous maintenance, calibration, and repair. A malfunction in one subsystem can cascade into failures elsewhere. For example, a broken hydroponics pump may reduce food output, causing nutritional deficits that affect physical and cognitive performance, which in turn can compromise maintenance and decision-making in other systems. Power generation is another critical vulnerability. Nuclear reactors, while theoretically long-lived, require precise management, shielding, and fuel replacement strategies. Degraded batteries, solar arrays, or fuel cells may limit energy availability, forcing prioritizations of essential systems while leaving secondary functions underpowered. Propulsion systems also deteriorate. Even with minimal use, structural stresses, thermal cycling, and radiation exposure affect engine components. Misalignment or failure in propulsion can compromise maneuvering, orbital insertion, or emergency avoidance of interstellar hazards. Redundancy is essential but comes at a cost. Additional mass increases energy requirements, complicating repairs, and straining life support. Over centuries, the crew may develop workarounds or improvisations to maintain functionality, but such solutions introduce further risk. Knowledge decay compounds technological challenges. Crew members born generations after departure may follow procedures without fully understanding underlying principles. Manuals may become outdated or incomprehensible due to linguistic and cultural drift. When unforeseen failures occur, crews may be unable to innovate solutions, relying instead on potentially incomplete instructions. Training multiple generations of technicians and engineers is crucial, but even extensive education cannot entirely prevent the erosion of tacit knowledge over centuries. The combination of material degradation, mechanical failure, and knowledge loss makes a generation ship inherently fragile. A single failure, if compounded by human error, can cascade into catastrophic consequences, threatening the survival of the population. Systems that were once redundant may no longer provide adequate backup, and improvisation under stress becomes increasingly hazardous. Even with the most rigorous protocols, the harsh environment of interstellar space, the inevitability of material, and the limitations of human cognition create a persistent threat. The ship is not merely a vessel, it is a living, aging ecosystem. Maintaining its integrity requires continuous vigilance, adaptability, and foresight. Every decision, repair, and procedure carries the weight of potential failure, and the consequences are magnified across generations, emphasizing that technological longevity is not merely a matter of engineering but a central factor in the survival of an entire civilization drifting. The Void. Chapter 16. Communication and information lags. Communication between a generation ship and Earth is constrained by the immutable speed of light, introducing profound limitations on decision-making and situational awareness. Initially, the ship can transmit updates and receive guidance from Earth, but as distance increases, delays become significant. At 10 light years, a message requires 10 years to reach Earth, with another 10 years for a response, a 20-year round trip. By the time the ship is hundreds of light years from home, communication becomes effectively historical, disconnected from real-time events. Crew members must make critical decisions based on outdated or incomplete information, operating in isolation from the very civilization that launched them. This lag impacts strategic planning, resource allocation, and navigation. Earth-based knowledge of astrophysical hazards, exoplanet conditions, or technological advances arrives decades or centuries late, requiring the ship to function autonomously. Information decay also affects morale and social cohesion. Messages from Earth may arrive that no longer correspond to the needs or understanding of onboard populations. Advancements in propulsion, medicine, or materials made on Earth may render ship systems obsolete, producing feelings of obsolescence and frustration among crew members. Education systems must compensate by teaching not just technical skills but critical thinking and adaptability, enabling crews to make independent decisions in the absence of timely guidance. Furthermore, the storage and retrieval of accumulated knowledge on board is a perpetual challenge. Digital libraries, manuals, and databases must be maintained over centuries, protected from radiation, hardware degradation, and format obsolescence. Even perfect information storage cannot replace experiential knowledge. Generations must understand not only procedures but also context and reasoning. Cultural drift may distort interpretations, producing misapplications or errors in execution. Contingency planning becomes essential. Autonomous decision-making protocols, redundant data systems, and distributed leadership structures help mitigate risks posed by communication delays. Yet no system is foolproof. Unexpected hazards, from micrometeoroid swarms to equipment failures, demand immediate action without consultation. The crew must rely on training, judgment, and coordination to respond effectively. Over time, the generation ship becomes increasingly isolated, not only physically but informationally. Earth becomes a distant memory, historical rather than interactive, and the ship must sustain civilization independently. Communication lags transform from an inconvenience into a structural challenge, defining operational strategy, social governance, and long-term survival. In this environment, the ability to act decisively, maintain knowledge continuity, and anticipate problems is as vital as oxygen, water, or energy, underscoring that information management is itself a core component of survival in interstellar travel. Chapter 17: Social Conflicts and Power Struggles on a Generation Ship. Social stability is as critical as life support systems. Yet human nature ensures that conflicts will arise. With thousands of people confined for centuries in a closed environment, disagreements over resources, leadership, and social privileges are inevitable. Small disputes can escalate into factionalism, threatening both social cohesion and operational functionality. The original command structure may lose legitimacy over generations as cultural drift, differing priorities, and evolving values challenge authority. Leaders must continually balance technical expertise with social acceptance, preventing resentment while ensuring that mission-critical decisions are respected. Conflict over resources is particularly dangerous. Food production, water distribution, and access to living space are limited, and perceived inequities can create tension. Disputes over reproduction, medical care, and privileges further strain relationships. Even minor disagreements, if left unresolved, can undermine morale and compliance. Factions may form around ideology, religion, or interpretation of the mission, producing competing power centers. In extreme cases, these groups may engage in sabotage or violence, jeopardizing critical systems and endangering lives. Governance strategies must incorporate mechanisms for dispute resolution, mediation, and justice, while avoiding overly authoritarian practices that provoke further unrest. Psychological stress amplifies conflict. Individuals born into a mission they did not choose may resist authority, struggle with purpose, or feel alienated from societal goals. Generational divides can exacerbate tensions. Younger populations make Western decisions made by elders, while older generations insist on continuity and adherence to established protocols. Cultural evolution also shapes conflict dynamics. Traditions and norms designed by the first generation may become irrelevant or contested, leading to friction between groups holding different interpretations of the mission's meaning. Maintaining trust and cooperation is a continuous task. Rituals, shared objectives, and transparent decision-making can foster unity, but these must evolve with the population, adapting to social, cultural, and psychological changes. The confined environment magnifies consequences. Unlike on Earth, there is no escape, disputes cannot be avoided, and small failures in social management can propagate quickly, affecting both morale and technical performance. Education and leadership training are essential to prepare crew members for negotiation, problem solving, and conflict resolution. Without these skills, minor disagreements can cascade into systemic crises. Ultimately, the success of a generation ship relies on the ability of its people to navigate social complexity, manage power dynamics, and maintain cohesion across centuries, proving that the greatest threat may not come from space itself, but from the human mind and society trapped within it. Chapter 18: Religion, Belief, and Cultural Cohesion. Religion and belief systems play a complex role in sustaining life aboard a generation ship, acting both as a source of cohesion and potential division. Humans naturally seek meaning, and in an environment where individual agency is constrained and existence is confined to a metallic vessel, belief systems offer purpose and comfort. Shared rituals, festivals, and traditions help bind the population together, reinforcing the mission's significance and instilling a sense of identity. A homogeneous religious culture can unify crew members, providing moral guidance, social norms, and emotional support. Yet, diversity in beliefs introduces challenges. Different faiths may compete for influence, attempting conversion or asserting authority over mission-critical decisions. Conflicts over interpretation doctrine or the ethical use of technology can escalate, threatening both social cohesion and survival. Ethical dilemmas arise when belief systems clash with operational necessities. For example, some groups may oppose genetic interventions essential for maintaining population health or reject medical treatments required to preserve life. Leadership must navigate these tensions carefully, ensuring that critical systems are maintained while respecting the psychological and cultural needs of the population. Cultural evolution complicates matters further. Over centuries, beliefs may shift, sects may emerge, and new philosophies may reinterpret the original mission. These changes can enhance social resilience by adapting meaning to evolving circumstances, but they can also create factionalism or ideological rigidity, undermining governance. Education and ritualized practices can preserve cohesion while reinforcing mission objectives, but flexibility is essential to accommodate generational changes. Leaders must balance faith, ethics, and practicality, fostering unity without suppressing legitimate cultural expression. Failure to manage belief systems effectively can lead to internal conflict, passive resistance, or deliberate sabotage, with cascading effects on both technical systems and population health. Religion, therefore, is not merely a private matter, it is a structural component of social survival, shaping cooperation, morale, and the transmission of values across generations. A generation ship's long-term success depends on integrating belief and culture into the operational framework, creating a society capable of enduring centuries of confinement, uncertainty, and isolation while maintaining purpose and cohesion. Chapter 19: Reproductive Ethics and Population Control. Reproduction aboard a generation ship is both a biological necessity and an ethical minefield. To maintain a viable population across centuries, the ship's inhabitants must carefully balance birth rates with mortality, resource limitations, and genetic diversity. Too few births threaten extinction, too many overload life support systems, food production, and living space. Systems of population control may include birth lotteries, merit-based permits, or genetic health screening, each with profound ethical implications. Who decides who may reproduce, and on what criteria? Merit-based systems prioritize skill, health, or genetic diversity, yet they inherently involve judgments about human worth. Lotteries introduce randomness, which may feel fair but can frustrate those eager to start families or those repeatedly denied permits. Genetic screening and interventions can prevent inbreeding and hereditary disease, but may provoke social or religious opposition, generating conflict over fundamental rights. The psychological impact on individuals is significant. Humans are biologically and emotionally driven to reproduce. Restricting reproduction can create grief, frustration, and a sense of injustice, potentially destabilizing social cohesion. Enforcement mechanisms must be delicate. Overly punitive measures provoke resentment, while leniency risks population instability. Intergenerational considerations add complexity. Policies acceptable to one generation may be rejected by the next, requiring ongoing governance, communication, and cultural adaptation. The ship's administrators must anticipate changing values while preserving both the technical and social integrity of the mission. Education plays a role, instilling an understanding of why population control is necessary for survival. Yet understanding does not eliminate emotional resistance. Population management also interacts with resource allocation, healthcare, and social hierarchies. Parents denied reproductive permission may feel alienated, which can ripple through communities, affecting cooperation and maintenance of critical systems. Even children born through permitted methods may face social stigma or internal conflict if conceived via genetic interventions or assisted reproductive technologies. The ethical landscape of reproduction aboard a generation ship illustrates a fundamental tension between individual freedom and collective survival. Every choice carries consequences that echo across decades, shaping the health, social stability, and continuity of civilization in isolation. Maintaining this balance is essential. Failure to manage reproduction ethically and effectively can endanger not only individual lives, but the survival of generations, demonstrating that biology and morality are inseparably linked in the extraordinary environment of interstellar travel. Chapter 20: Education, Skill Redundancy, and Knowledge Preservation. Education aboard a generation ship extends far beyond simple schooling. It is the foundation of civilization in transit. Every generation must acquire the technical knowledge necessary to operate, maintain, and repair critical life support, propulsion, and energy systems. Skills must be redundant across multiple crew members to mitigate the risk of accidental death or attrition. Training includes engineering, medicine, agriculture, environmental systems, navigation, and emergency procedures, but it also encompasses problem-solving, critical thinking, and adaptability. Knowledge is preserved through layered strategies, manuals, digital archives, interactive training simulations, and direct mentorship. However, challenges accumulate over centuries. Language evolves, cultural interpretations shift, and the tacit understanding embedded in hands-on experience can be lost. Without continuous and engaged instruction, crew members may follow procedures without fully understanding the underlying principles, compromising flexibility and innovation in emergencies. Education must also address cultural continuity and psychological well-being. History, art, literature, and philosophy provide context and meaning, sustaining morale and reinforcing shared identity. Rituals, storytelling, and ceremonies transmit cultural knowledge alongside technical expertise. Motivation is a central challenge. Onboard roles are predetermined by mission needs, reducing traditional incentives such as career choice or personal ambition. Educational systems must foster intrinsic motivation, pride in skill mastery, and a sense of purpose connected to the survival of future generations. Apprenticeship models, mentorship hierarchies, and hands-on problem-solving ensure skills are deeply embedded rather than superficially learned. The interdependence of knowledge, culture, and survival underscores the importance of a holistic educational approach. Loss of critical knowledge, even in a single domain, can endanger entire systems, while lapses in cultural education erode morale and social cohesion. Education is therefore both a technical and social imperative, a continuous effort to equip generations with the tools, understanding, and resilience necessary to sustain life across centuries. Maintaining this complex network of knowledge requires foresight, redundancy, and constant adaptation, illustrating that the survival of humanity aboard a generation ship depends as much on the mind as on machinery. Chapter 21: Psychological Resilience and Mental Health. The human mind aboard a generation ship faces unique pressures unlike any on Earth. Isolation, confinement, and the relentless monotony of life within metallic walls generate profound psychological stress. Generations are born, live, and die in an environment where the horizon is artificial and the sky is a ceiling. The absence of natural cycles, open spaces, and direct contact with Earth can produce anxiety, depression, and a pervasive sense of existential emptiness. Social interdependence magnifies these effects. Interpersonal conflict is unavoidable, and the limited population intensifies the impact of disputes. Mental health care is therefore critical, and it must be integrated into every aspect of shipboard life. Psychologists, counselors, and social facilitators provide ongoing support, monitor community well-being, and implement interventions to prevent crises. Stress reduction strategies include structured recreation, arts, music, and virtual reality experiences designed to simulate natural environments. These tools mitigate monotony and provide emotional relief, yet they compete with finite energy, space, and resources. Maintaining purpose and meaning is central to psychological resilience. Individuals must perceive their actions as vital to the survival of the ship and future generations. Rituals, storytelling, communal celebrations, and recognition of achievements reinforce the sense that life aboard the ship is consequential. Generations must be trained not only in technical and operational skills, but in emotional intelligence, conflict resolution, and leadership. These competencies allow communities to adapt to inevitable social challenges, manage disputes, and prevent escalation. Recurrent stresses such as emergencies, system failures, or accidents can trigger collective trauma. Leaders and educators must prepare populations to cope with loss, scarcity, and uncertainty without fracturing cohesion. Sleep, nutrition, exercise, and structured daily routines further support mental health. Maintaining physiological and psychological stability in an artificial environment. Over centuries, cultural drift, shifts in belief systems, and evolving values influence resilience. Practices established by early generations may lose relevance, requiring adaptive strategies to preserve morale and social cohesion. Psychological failure is catastrophic. Disengagement, rebellion, or apathy can compromise maintenance, decision-making, and life support systems, threatening survival. The generation ship thus becomes a crucible of human cognition and emotion, where individual resilience and collective mental health are as critical as structural integrity, engineering, or resource management. Success depends on the ability to maintain a population that is not only technically competent, but emotionally and socially capable of thriving under relentless isolation, demonstrating that the mind is as vital to survival as any system aboard the ship. Chapter 22. Crisis Management and Emergency Response in the Vast Emptiness of Interstellar Space. Crises aboard a generation ship are inevitable and potentially catastrophic. System failures, accidents, or environmental hazards can occur without warning, and response options are extremely limited. Unlike Earth, there is no external assistance. The crew must rely entirely on their own skills, preparation, and ingenuity. Life support malfunctions are particularly critical. Oxygen, water, temperature, and food systems are interdependent, and a single failure can escalate rapidly. Emergency protocols require coordinated action, redundancy, and rapid problem solving to prevent widespread casualties. Training is ongoing, with every generation drilled in emergency procedures and simulations to prepare for a range of scenarios. Fire, radiation leaks, hull breaches, or contamination events must be managed swiftly, often under extreme physical and psychological stress. Equipment degradation and technological obsolescence increase the complexity of crisis management. Replacement parts may be imperfect, and knowledge gaps may reduce problem-solving capability. Communication lags with Earth mean that guidance or support is unavailable, placing full responsibility for survival on the onboard crew. Social dynamics can complicate response. Panic, fear, or disagreement over priorities may interfere with effective coordination, especially if conflicts exist between factions or generations. Leadership structures must be resilient, clear, and respected to ensure order. Contingency planning includes redundancies in personnel, equipment, and procedures, but these add weight, complexity, and energy demands, forcing trade-offs with other mission priorities. Psychological resilience is central. Stress impairs judgment, and prolonged crises can exacerbate mental health issues. Crew members must balance urgency with caution, improvisation with protocol, and individual responsibility with collective action. Recurrent or prolonged emergencies can wear down morale, disrupt social cohesion, and threaten long-term mission viability. The most successful ships integrate technical, social, and psychological preparedness, recognizing that survival depends not only on engineering reliability, but also on leadership, training, and human adaptability. Every crisis is both a test and an opportunity. It demonstrates the limits of technology, exposes vulnerabilities in social systems, and measures the endurance of human ingenuity under extreme conditions. In interstellar space, the capacity to manage emergencies is not optional. It is the defining factor between survival and extinction for a civilization in transit. Chapter 23: Resource Scarcity and Prioritizations on a Generation Ship. Resources are finite, and scarcity is constant. Water, food, oxygen, energy, and raw materials for repairs must be managed meticulously for centuries. Every individual's consumption has direct consequences for others, and misallocation can cascade into systemic failures. Hydroponic farms and bioreactors produce food, but crop yields fluctuate, diseases can emerge, and nutrient recycling is never perfect. Water must be reclaimed from waste, condensed from humidity, and continuously purified. Even minor losses accumulate over decades. Energy management is equally critical. Life support, propulsion, climate control, and artificial lighting consume significant power. Backup systems add redundancy, but increase mass and strain energy reserves. Decision-making about resource allocation is both technical and ethical. Prioritizing energy for life support over recreational or cultural activities may preserve survival, but erodes morale. Limiting food or water access to certain areas or populations could prevent systemic collapse but generate social unrest. Population control intersects with scarcity. Birth rates must match the ship's capacity to provide resources, and deviations can cause stress, malnutrition, or conflict. Reproductive policies are enforced not only for genetic health, but to preserve the fragile balance of life aboard the vessel. Maintenance requires additional resources, spare parts, fabrication materials, and skilled personnel. Improper distribution can cause cascading mechanical failures, further threatening the population. Contingency reserves, while essential, are finite. Emergencies, from unexpected damage to environmental fluctuations, can deplete these reserves rapidly. Social structures must be prepared to make difficult choices under pressure, balancing fairness, efficiency, and long-term sustainability. Psychological consequences of scarcity are profound. Knowing that personal consumption impacts the survival of hundreds or thousands can induce stress, conflict, and anxiety. Transparent governance, clear communication, and shared understanding of necessity are essential to maintain compliance and trust. Over generations, cumulative errors or mismanagement of resources can imperil the mission, demonstrating that resource allocation is not merely operational but existential. The ship is a closed ecosystem where scarcity drives both technical and social imperative. Success depends on precision, foresight, cooperation, and adaptability. A failure to balance competing needs risks not just temporary hardship but long-term survival, illustrating that resource management is the lifeblood of civilization in transit. Chapter 24: The Dangers of External Hazards. Interstellar space is not empty, and external hazards present existential threats to a generation ship. Micrometeoroids, cosmic radiation, Rogue asteroids and gas clouds travel at relativistic speeds, carrying immense energy. Even a collision with a grain of dust can puncture hulls or damage critical systems. Shielding, both passive and active, is essential. Water, polyethylene, and structural metals absorb radiation and impact energy, but thick layers add mass, requiring more energy for propulsion and complicating repairs. Navigation systems must constantly monitor for potential collisions, but sensor failures, unexpected trajectories, or insufficient warning time can result in catastrophic impact. Solar storms or cosmic radiation events pose additional challenges. Despite shielding, cumulative exposure can degrade electronics, compromise life support systems, and increase long-term health risks for crew members. Radiation may damage DNA, leading to cancer, birth defects, or reduced fertility, threatening genetic viability over generations. Even when hazards are detected, mitigation requires energy, skill, and coordination. Thruster adjustments to avoid rogue objects consume fuel and may affect trajectories, delaying arrival and extending the mission. Encounters with dense interstellar gas clouds introduce further risks. At high velocities, impacts with particles create thermal and mechanical stress on the hull, potentially overwhelming protective systems. Slowing down reduces impact energy, but prolongs exposure to resource constraints and isolation. Contingency planning involves redundancy in navigation, shielding, and repair systems, but these measures are never perfect. Emergencies must be managed autonomously, as Earth-based guidance is delayed by years or centuries. Psychological stress compounds technical risk. Awareness of invisible hazards creates persistent anxiety, eroding morale and decision-making capacity. Social cohesion is tested when risk distribution is perceived as unequal. For example, when some populations are closer to exposed areas or assigned hazardous duties. Leadership must coordinate both technical mitigation and social management simultaneously, balancing fairness, efficiency, and survival imperative. Every external hazard demonstrates the precariances of life aboard a generation ship. The combination of unforgiving physics, imperfect technology, and human limitations creates a constant tension between survival and catastrophe. Long-term success requires vigilance, adaptability, and resilience across generations, proving that navigating the void is as much a social and psychological challenge as it is a technological one. Chapter 25. Adaptation and Physical Evolution. Life aboard a generation ship imposes unique physiological pressures that can lead to adaptation over generations. Artificial gravity, often created through rotation, is weaker than Earth's natural gravity, affecting musculoelastic development. Bones may become less dense, muscles weaker, and cardiovascular systems less robust. Over centuries, these adaptations accumulate, producing humans who are physically suited to life in low-gravity, confined environments, but less capable of surviving on planetary surfaces. Immune systems may also evolve differently. Living in a sterile, controlled ecosystem reduces exposure to pathogens, which can weaken immune responses to unfamiliar microorganisms encountered upon arrival. Sensory adaptation occurs as well. Vision, hearing, and spatial perception may adjust to artificial lighting in closed spaces, and the mechanical sounds of ship systems, potentially impairing performance in natural environments. Reproduction adds additional evolutionary pressures. Restricted mate choice, controlled population size, and potential genetic interventions influence allele frequencies, shaping the gene pool deliberately or inadvertently. Genetic drift and inbreeding, if not managed, can lead to reduced diversity, increasing susceptibility to disease and reducing resilience. Behavioral adaptation is equally critical. Social structures, work routines, and communal living cultivate cooperation, conflict management, and conformity to mission goals. Generations born into these conditions may value stability and obedience over exploration, potentially affecting innovation and adaptability. Nutrition and exercise regimes are designed to mitigate these effects, maintaining health within the constraints of artificial ecosystems. However, no intervention can fully replicate the dynamic environment of Earth. Physical adaptation therefore shapes not only individual health, but the collective capability of the population to survive planetary settlement. When the ship finally reaches a destination, the descendants of the original crew may face extreme challenges. Their bodies, adapted to low gravity, confined spaces, and controlled environmental conditions, must adjust rapidly to new ecosystems, surface gravity, and unfamiliar pathogens. Those unable to adapt may succumb to illness, injury, or reduced mobility, impacting survival rates and genetic diversity. Evolution aboard the ship is therefore both a natural response to environmental pressures and a critical factor in mission planning. Engineers, medical personnel, and planners must anticipate these changes, preparing for the long-term consequences of centuries of adaptation. Understanding these physiological and evolutionary dynamics is essential. The humans who arrive at the destination may be fundamentally different from those who departed, presenting both challenges and opportunities for survival, colonization, and the continuation of humanity beyond Earth. Chapter 26: The Psychology of Purpose and Motivation. Maintaining motivation across centuries is one of the greatest challenges for a generation ship. Individuals are born into a mission they did not choose, confined to an artificial environment, and separated from Earth by unimaginable distances. Finding purpose in this context is essential for mental health, social cohesion, and mission success. Early generations rely on connection to Earth's storytelling and ritual to instill meaning, but as distance grows and direct contact fades, purpose must be sustained internally. Leadership and education systems cultivate a shared understanding of the mission, that survival, maintenance, and preparation for descendants are vital tasks. Yet intellectual comprehension alone does not suffice. Humans require emotional engagement, recognition, and a sense that their actions have tangible impact. Reward systems may include social honors, responsibilities, or symbolic achievements that reinforce the importance of contribution. Cultural rituals and ceremonies embed these values in daily life, providing continuity, cohesion, and a sense of identity. Individuals must internalize the mission as a personal purpose, not merely a duty imposed externally. Generational shifts create further complexity. Younger populations, accustomed to life aboard the ship, may question the value of distant goals set centuries earlier. Without reinforcement, apathy, rebellion, or disengagement can arise, threatening both technical operations and social stability. Motivation interacts directly with survival. Disengaged individuals may neglect maintenance, make errors, or resist governance structures. Critical skills could be lost, systems degraded, and safety compromised. Psychological support, counseling, and community engagement are therefore integral to sustaining purpose. Education must incorporate not only technical training, but also ethical reasoning, problem-solving, and communal values, ensuring that each generation understands both the mission and their role within it. Personal fulfillment, creativity, and social recognition help mitigate the monotony of confinement. Leadership must continually adapt motivational strategies to evolving cultural norms, environmental conditions, and generational attitudes. The psychology of purpose is inseparable from operational success. A population that lacks engagement, meaning, or hope cannot reliably maintain systems, manage crises, or sustain life across centuries. In essence, motivation becomes a structural component of survival, as essential as food, water, or oxygen. It ensures that human energy, attention, and creativity continue to power the mission, enabling successive generations to endure, adapt, and prepare for the challenges of reaching and colonizing distant worlds. Chapter 27: The Perils of Isolation and Social Fragmentation. Isolation aboard a generation ship is absolute and enduring, creating a unique social environment with consequences unlike any on Earth. Generations live, work, and die entirely within the confines of the vessel, the social universe limited to the same thousands of people for centuries. Physical separation from Earth, exposure to artificial environments, and lack of novelty intensify psychological and social pressures. Social bonds are simultaneously essential and fragile. Cooperation is required to maintain life support systems, cultivate food, and preserve critical knowledge, yet interpersonal conflicts, personality clashes, and generational differences are magnified. Small disagreements over resources, privileges, or responsibilities can escalate into factionalism. Over time, subgroups may form around ideology, religion, occupation, or family lineages, each asserting influence and vying for authority. Without careful governance, these factions threaten cohesion and operational stability. Isolation also exacerbates emotional challenges. Crew members must navigate stress, monotony, and the absence of natural cycles, all while living under constant awareness that failure affects hundreds or thousands of people. Depression, anxiety, and apathy become systemic risks, spreading through social networks and reducing engagement with essential maintenance and operational duties. Cultural drift compounds the challenge. Traditions, language, and values evolve independently, potentially creating generational misunderstandings or disputes about the mission's purpose. Leadership must actively preserve shared identity and mission focus, while allowing sufficient flexibility to accommodate evolving beliefs and priorities. Social cohesion mechanisms include ritualized ceremonies, community events, recognition of contributions, and educational reinforcement of shared purpose. Psychological support structures, counseling, and recreational activities reduce tension, prevent alienation, and sustain morale. Emergency planning considers social dynamics as critical. Conflicts arising during crises, if unmanaged, can magnify danger, endangering lives and critical systems. The risk of social fragmentation underscores the interdependence of human behavior, governance, and mission success. Even with flawless technology and abundant resources, a fractured society may fail. A generation ship is therefore not just a technological construct but a microcosm of human civilization, where every relationship, social norm, and communal practice contributes directly to survival. Understanding, managing, and preserving social cohesion is as essential as engineering reliability, energy production, or life support integrity, emphasizing that human factors are central to the ultimate success of interstellar exploration. Chapter 28: Conflict Resolution and Governance Strategies. Effective governance aboard a generation ship is a matter of life and death, not simply policy. Leadership must manage complex social dynamics, balance technical expertise with authority, and maintain trust across generations who did not choose the mission. Conflict resolution is a continuous process, addressing disputes over resources, reproduction, leadership, or ideology. Disagreements cannot be ignored, there is no escape, and unresolved tension jeopardizes both operational systems and social stability. Leadership structures often combine technocratic expertise with communal input, ensuring that essential systems are maintained while fostering legitimacy and compliance. Hierarchical models may prioritize engineers and specialists in decision-making, yet inclusive councils or democratic mechanisms provide a sense of fairness and representation. Ritualized processes, dispute mediation, and transparent decision-making strengthen cohesion and reduce resentment. Education plays a role, training crew members in negotiation, leadership, and collaborative problem-solving equips future generations to manage conflicts autonomously. Policies must be adaptive, as cultural drift and generational change alter values and expectations. Rules effective in one generation may require modification in the next, necessitating flexibility without undermining authority. Resource allocation during crises highlights the interplay between governance and survival. Decisions about rationing, prioritizations, or emergency duties must be enforced fairly and consistently to prevent social fragmentation. Ethical dilemmas arise, balancing individual needs with collective survival, distributing privileges, and maintaining morale under scarcity. Leadership must navigate these tensions while maintaining operational efficiency. Over time, governance evolves to incorporate lessons from emergencies, social dynamics, and technological failures. Continuous evaluation, training, and adaptation ensure that decision-making structures remain effective despite environmental and generational challenges. In this context, conflict resolution is not merely about maintaining peace. It is central to sustaining life, operational capability, and mission success. A breakdown in governance can cascade into systemic failure, while robust leadership enables the ship to navigate centuries of isolation, resource scarcity, and social complexity. Ultimately, the generation ship is both a technological and social experiment, where governance, conflict management, and human behavior are inseparable from the engineering feats required to reach distant stars. Chapter 29: Long-term health and disease management. The health of a population aboard a generation ship is an ongoing and complex challenge. Unlike on Earth, medical intervention is limited by available resources, technology, and personnel. Diseases that are easily treated on Earth can become catastrophic if systems fail or supplies run low. Chronic illnesses, genetic disorders, and age-related conditions accumulate over generations, increasing the need for effective preventive care and early intervention. Immunity is a critical concern. Living in a closed, sterile environment reduces exposure to pathogens, potentially weakening immune responses to new microbes encountered during planetary settlement. Radiation exposure from cosmic rays, even with shielding, presents long-term health risks, including cancer, neurological disorders, and genetic mutations. Medical facilities must operate continuously, providing care for the sick while simultaneously maintaining capacity to handle emergencies. Pharmaceuticals, surgical equipment, and diagnostic tools require maintenance and, in some cases, on-board fabrication. Any failure in these systems risks cascading consequences, affecting not just individual health, but the stability of the entire population. Preventive medicine is prioritized. Regular screenings, vaccinations, and genetic monitoring help mitigate risk. Education and training ensure multiple crew members are capable of performing essential medical procedures, providing redundancy in skill and knowledge. Nutrition and diet are critical for sustaining health over generations. Hydroponic and closed-loop agricultural systems must provide balanced diets that support bone density, cardiovascular health, and reproductive capability. Failures in these systems can reduce fertility, increase disease susceptibility, and compromise the ability of future generations to thrive. Psychological well-being intersect with physical health. Stress, isolation, and monotony reduce immune function, increase vulnerability to illness, and can affect adherence to medical protocols. Social cohesion and mental health support are therefore integral to maintaining overall health. Over centuries, the accumulation of minor errors, environmental stressors, and unforeseen conditions can magnify into significant population-level health risks. Effective management requires anticipation, redundancy, and constant vigilance. Every generation must maintain medical knowledge, adapt to evolving health challenges, and ensure that preventive measures, treatments, and skills are not lost. In essence, long-term survival aboard a generation ship depends on the seamless integration of physical, genetic, and psychological health management, demonstrating that medicine and human biology are as critical to the mission as propulsion or life support systems. Chapter 30: Navigating Cosmic Hazards. Interstellar space is a hostile and unpredictable environment, presenting hazards that threaten both life and infrastructure aboard a generation ship. Micrometeoroids, space debris, cosmic radiation, and rogue celestial bodies travel at velocities sufficient to inflict catastrophic damage upon collision. Shielding, including layers of water, polyethylene, and metal, protects the ship but increases mass, energy requirements, and maintenance complexity. Navigation systems must constantly monitor for potential collisions, but sensor failures, unexpected object trajectories, or miscalculations can render even the best planning insufficient. Encounters with interstellar gas clouds or dust increase the risk of cumulative damage at high velocities. Even sparse particles can erode surfaces, damage electronics, and compromise life support integrity. Propulsion adjustments to avoid hazards require careful energy management, as slowing to reduce collision risk extends journey time and resource consumption. Radiation poses an insidious long-term threat. Cosmic rays penetrate, shielding and gradually damage biological tissue, increasing cancer risk, impairing reproductive health, and introducing mutations that may affect future generations. Cumulative radiation also degrades electronic components, reducing the reliability of critical systems. Emergencies arising from external hazards demand immediate, autonomous responses. Earth-based guidance is delayed by decades or centuries, leaving the crew entirely responsible for life or death decisions. Psychological pressure is immense. Awareness of constant, invisible threats can erode morale, induce anxiety, and complicate decision-making. Leadership must balance transparency with stability, ensuring that crew members remain vigilant without succumbing to fear or panic. Social dynamics influence hazard management. Disputes over responsibilities, risk exposure, or resource allocation during emergencies can exacerbate threats, highlighting the importance of cohesion and clear governance. Over generations, the accumulation of minor failures, misjudgments, or unforeseen hazards can magnify into catastrophic outcomes. Surviving interstellar space requires not only engineering excellence, but resilient social structures, effective communication, and disciplined human behavior. Each encounter with a cosmic hazard tests the integration of technology, human judgment, and adaptability, proving that the void is unforgiving and that the success of a generation ship depends as much on the crew's ability to navigate risk as it does on the moon. Robustness of the vessel itself. Chapter 31. Redundancy in System Backups. Redundancy is the cornerstone of survival on a generation ship, a principle that applies to every critical system. Life support, propulsion, power generation, water recycling, and communication networks all require multiple layers of backup to withstand failures that could otherwise endanger thousands of lives. Redundant systems reduce the probability of catastrophic collapse, but come with trade-offs. Added mass increases energy requirements, maintenance complexity rises, and every additional system competes for limited space and resources. Life support redundancy includes multiple air scrubbers, water purifiers, and nutrient recycling loops. Each must function independently, ensuring that if one subsystem fails, others sustain life without interruption. Propulsion systems are duplicated to allow maneuvering if a primary engine becomes inoperable, and energy systems are designed with multiple reactors, batteries, or stored fuel reserves to prevent blackouts. Technical redundancy must be paired with human redundancy. Multiple crew members are trained in critical tasks to avoid knowledge bottlenecks. Apprenticeships, cross-training, and skill overlap ensure that no individual is irreplaceable. Loss of personnel due to illness, accidents, or natural attrition can otherwise jeopardize operations. Redundancy also extends to information storage. Technical manuals, procedural guides, and digital archives are duplicated across multiple media and locations within the ship to protect against hardware failure, radiation, or human error radiation. Knowledge decay is mitigated through repeated training, mentorship, and documentation, ensuring that each generation has access to the expertise needed for system operation. Emergency protocols incorporate redundancy in procedures as well. Multiple communication channels, backup navigation methods, and contingency plans for various hazard scenarios ensure that no single point of failure can compromise the mission. Despite these precautions, redundancy is not infallible. Over centuries, materials degrade, skills may be lost, and unforeseen interactions between systems can create vulnerabilities. Maintaining redundancy requires constant vigilance, careful resource management, and ongoing adaptation. The philosophy of fail-safe is embedded in the ship's design, but human diligence, cultural adherence to protocol, and cross-generational knowledge transmission are equally essential. In essence, redundancy transforms the ship from a collection of mechanical components into a resilient ecosystem, where technical, human, and informational layers interact to preserve life across the vast emptiness of interstellar space. Chapter 32. The threat of technological obsolescence. Even the most advanced generation ship is subject to technological obsolescence over the centuries-long journey. The systems designed and constructed at launch will inevitably be surpassed by innovations on Earth, leaving the crew operating with outdated technology. Propulsion, energy efficiency, life support mechanisms, and medical equipment all risk becoming inferior to newer designs, creating challenges in both operation and morale. Awareness of obsolescence can demotivate the crew, who may perceive their efforts as outdated or less effective than contemporary standards back home. Maintenance and repair strategies must account for limited availability of spare parts. Components cannot be upgraded externally, and onboard manufacturing may only partially compensate. Knowledge of superior technology on Earth creates a persistent psychological burden, emphasizing the isolation and permanence of the ship's self-reliance. Additionally, crew members may encounter technical failures for which Earth-based solutions have already been developed but cannot be implemented aboard, increasing risk and complexity. Education and knowledge preservation are vital countermeasures. Successive generations must understand not only how to maintain existing systems, but also the principles behind their design, allowing innovation and adaptation using onboard resources. However, cultural drift and evolving educational priorities can reduce the effectiveness of this strategy, leaving gaps in understanding over time. Obsolescence also interacts with resource allocation. Investing limited energy and materials in repairing old technology may reduce capacity for life support, infrastructure, or emergency reserves. Strategic planning is necessary to prioritize what must be maintained versus what can degrade without threatening survival. Finally, obsolescence extends beyond machinery to include procedures, software, and protocols. Manuals may become outdated linguistically or conceptually, and practices that were once effective may fail under new conditions or after generations of drift. The crew must constantly adapt, innovate, and anticipate degradation, demonstrating that the challenge of technology is not only physical but temporal. In a generation ship, survival depends on maintaining functionality and adaptability long after the original designers have passed, proving that the passage of time is as formidable a force as the vacuum and radiation of interstellar space. Chapter 33. Cultural drift and identity formation over centuries. The culture aboard a generation ship evolves independently of Earth, producing identities, traditions, and social norms that differ significantly from those of the original crew. Generations born mid-journey inherit a life defined by the ship itself. Earth becomes a distant myth rather than a lived reality. Language shifts, vocabulary evolves, and communication styles adapt to the artificial environment, creating subtle barriers to understanding older manuals or records. Rituals, ceremonies, and storytelling preserve a sense of mission, but interpretations change over time. Practices intended to maintain cohesion may be reinterpreted, leading to variations in beliefs and priorities across generations. Social hierarchies can emerge based on occupation, skill, or lineage, and these may diverge from the structures established at launch. The collective identity of ship-borne populations is shaped more by daily life aboard the vessel than by distant earthly culture. Psychological adaptation reinforces these cultural shifts. Humans internalize norms that maximize survival and cooperation in a confined, resource-limited environment. Creativity, art, and storytelling evolve to reflect the realities of the ship, producing a culture rich in symbolic meaning but distinct from Earth's. These cultural changes can enhance resilience, as shared identity fosters cooperation and stability, yet they also risk mission drift. where priorities diverge from the original goals of exploration or colonization. Leaders and educators must actively preserve knowledge and values critical to mission success, while allowing cultural evolution to sustain morale and meaning. Tensions may arise when new beliefs, customs, or interpretations conflict with operational needs. Conflicts between factions or generations may challenge governance and threaten cohesion. Cultural drift also influences innovation, problem-solving approaches, risk assessment, and technical priorities may shift in ways unforeseen by the original planners. Education systems attempt to anchor the population to core principles, yet the dynamic interplay between necessity, creativity, and generational change ensures that culture remains fluid. The generation ship becomes a self-contained civilization, where identity, tradition, and purpose are inseparable from the environment, constraint, and collective memory. Long-term survival depends not only on technology and resources, but on the ability to balance cultural evolution with mission continuity, ensuring that each generation retains the knowledge, skills, and cohesion necessary to endure centuries in isolation while remaining aligned with the ultimate goals of interstellar travel. Chapter 34: Arrival Preparation and Deceleration, Approaching the Destination Star System. The generation ship must execute complex deceleration and arrival procedures to avoid overshooting or crashing into the planet. After centuries of high-speed travel, reducing velocity safely requires precise calculations, immense energy, and flawless execution. Engines must fire in opposition to momentum, applying consistent thrust over decades or even centuries to gradually slow the vessel. The structural integrity of the ship is tested during prolonged deceleration. Stresses from engine operation, thermal variation, and rotational forces challenge materials already weakened by centuries of use. Redundant systems, previously essential for life support and propulsion, must be reconfigured to support deceleration and arrival procedures. Failures in navigation, power distribution, or mechanical components at this stage can be catastrophic, potentially destroying the ship within moments of entering the target system. Sensor systems provide real-time data on trajectory, planetary position, and orbital insertion, but interpretation relies entirely on human judgment and automated computation. Communication with Earth is limited by light-speed delays, leaving the crew to act autonomously in life-or-death situations. Arrival preparation extends beyond mechanical operation. The population must also prepare for planetary settlement. Physiological, social, and logistical considerations are addressed simultaneously. Crew members review survival protocols, assess readiness for planetary conditions, and organize the first settlement teams. Emergency contingencies anticipate failure scenarios, including collision, mechanical breakdown, or uninhabitable planetary conditions. Training exercises simulate potential emergencies to minimize human error. Social coordination is critical. Assigning roles, ensuring cooperation, and maintaining morale requires careful leadership. The psychological burden is immense. The culmination of centuries-long effort and the knowledge that failure at this stage may nullify generations of sacrifice creates stress that can compromise decision-making. The success of arrival depends on integration of technology, human skill, and social cohesion. Every generation contributes to preparation, building on the knowledge, experience, and training of predecessors. In this way, deceleration and approach are as much a test of the crew's operational, psychological, and social capabilities as they are of engineering and propulsion technologies, proving that the final moments before arrival are among the most perilous and consequential in the entire mission. Chapter 35: Planetary Descent and Initial Settlement. Once the generation ship completes deceleration and enters orbit around the target planet, the first major challenge is planetary descent and establishing a viable settlement. Decades of planning, training, and preparation culminate in this critical phase, yet success is far from guaranteed. The initial landing teams must contend with the physical consequences of long-term space adaptation, reduced bone density, weaker muscles, and altered cardiovascular function can compromise mobility and endurance. Even younger, healthier individuals may struggle to traverse uneven terrain, carry equipment, or perform physically demanding tasks. Environmental uncertainties compound the risk. Surface conditions can differ significantly from remote observations, atmospheric compositions, gravity variations, temperature fluctuations, and weather patterns may introduce unexpected hazards. Soil composition, water quality, and local microorganisms pose additional challenges. The landing process itself requires precise navigation to avoid catastrophic collisions, taking into account the planet's gravity, rotation, and potential obstacles. Equipment for settlement, shelters, power systems, life support infrastructure, and food cultivation modules must be deployed efficiently to ensure survival. Coordination between the ship and descending teams is essential. Failure to maintain supply lines or communication could leave settlers stranded or inadequately equipped. Social and logistical dynamics also play a critical role. Crew members may have differing priorities. Some prioritize resource extraction and maintaining the ship. Others focus on exploration or planetary infrastructure. Conflicts over allocation of personnel, supplies, and decision-making authority can jeopardize the early settlement. Contingency planning anticipates partial failure. The ship may remain habitable to support those unable to descend immediately. Yet prolonged dependence on orbiting infrastructure risks depletion of supplies or mechanical degradation. Cultural and psychological adaptation influences behavior. Individuals born entirely aboard the ship may experience anxiety, fear, or resistance when confronted with an alien environment. Establishing social norms, routines, and cooperative structures is as essential as constructing physical habitats. Long-term success depends on balancing immediate survival with strategic expansion, planting crops, constructing shelters, and establishing sustainable life support loops while monitoring environmental hazards and maintaining shipboard operations. Each decision, action, and contingency shapes the trajectory of the new colony. Planetary descent is not merely a mechanical maneuver. It represents the intersection of human adaptability, technological resilience, and collective strategy, determining whether centuries of effort result in thriving settlement or catastrophic failure. Chapter 36: Ecological and Biological Challenges on the New Planet. Upon landing, the colonists face the complexities of interacting with an alien ecosystem. Even planets deemed habitable from afar may harbor unexpected environmental hazards. Soil chemistry may be incompatible with Earth-based agriculture, local microorganisms could be pathogenic, and native flora or fauna, if present, may pose direct threats. Colonists must adapt agricultural systems, recycling and modifying water and nutrient supplies to support sustainable crop growth. Any miscalculation can reduce food availability, affecting population health and operational capacity. Water access may be uneven or contaminated with unfamiliar chemical compounds. Life support systems from the ship may initially supplement shortages, but reliance on imported systems is limited and unsustainable over time. Biological adaptation extends to human physiology as well. Microbial exposure, atmospheric differences, and gravitational changes require gradual acclimatization to prevent illness, injury, or compromised immune function. Genetic health remains a concern. Small population size combined with reproductive constraints necessitates careful planning to maintain diversity and prevent hereditary disorders. Psychological adaptation is equally important. Humans who have lived entirely in artificial environments may experience disorientation, anxiety, or resistance when confronted with open spaces, weather, and ecological unpredictability. Cultural adaptation supports cohesion, defining social roles, settlement priorities, and communal responsibilities in a novel environment. Resource management is critical, balancing the demands of settlement expansion, food production, shelter construction, and continued ship operation requires careful planning and coordination. Unexpected interactions between environmental hazards and social structures can exacerbate risk, stress, conflict, or errors may reduce efficiency or compromise safety. Monitoring, experimentation, and iterative problem-solving are essential to establish stable systems that allow the population to survive and reproduce effectively. Over time, the colony must develop resilient ecological practices, integrating environmental observations with engineering, agriculture, and social organization. Success is not guaranteed. Early mistakes may have cascading effects, reducing genetic diversity, depleting resources, or creating social instability. The first generations on the planet must therefore be skilled, adaptable, and collaborative, transforming centuries of preparation aboard the ship into practical strategies for survival. The interplay of biological, environmental, and social challenges demonstrates that planetary settlement is not merely a continuation of the journey, but a complex, multidimensional test of human ingenuity, adaptability, and resilience. Chapter 37. Survival of the fittest and natural selection. Life on a newly settled planet introduces intense selective pressures that continue the evolutionary and adaptive processes begun aboard the generation ship. Humans who have lived their entire lives in artificial gravity, sterile environments, and confined spaces now face open terrain, variable weather, and exposure to unfamiliar microorganisms. Those who are physically stronger, healthier, and more adaptable are more likely to survive and thrive, while the less fit may suffer illness, injury, or reduced reproductive success. This process acts as a form of natural selection, reshaping the population over generations. Genetic diversity is critically important. Small populations risk bottlenecks that reduce resilience to disease, environmental fluctuations, or social instability. Careful reproductive management must continue to preserve diversity, balancing selective pressures with ethical considerations. Social adaptability is equally crucial. Humans must develop new skills, routines, and cooperative structures suited to the planetary environment. Tasks such as agriculture, construction, water management, and exploration require flexibility, problem-solving, and collaboration. Failures in coordination or communication can exacerbate physical vulnerabilities, leading to preventable injuries or fatalities. Psychological resilience is tested as well. Individuals accustomed to life in controlled, predictable environments must adjust to uncertainty, isolation, and the emotional impact of risk and loss. Failure to maintain morale can compromise social cohesion, reduce efficiency, and increase conflict. Environmental hazards introduce additional pressures. Storms, extreme temperatures, unfamiliar flora and fauna, and microbial pathogens challenge both health and infrastructure. Monitoring, adaptation, and rapid response are critical to ensure survival. Technology left behind from the ship assists with initial settlement, but reliance on artificial systems cannot substitute for long-term ecological understanding. Colonists must integrate observation, experimentation, and innovation to develop sustainable practices that maintain life on the planet. Over generations, human physiology, behavior, and culture evolved to match the demands of the new world. Survival is contingent not only on individual fitness but also on social organization, resource management, and technological adaptability. The first settlers effectively determine the trajectory of future generations, establishing systems, norms, and practices that will influence success or failure for centuries. The planet is both opportunity and crucible, where the interplay of biology, society, and environment defines the limits of human endurance and the ultimate legacy of the generation ship mission. Chapter 38. Long-term social stability and colony management. Establishing a colony on a new planet requires deliberate social engineering and governance to ensure long-term stability. Unlike aboard the generation ship, settlers now face open space, unpredictable hazards, and the need to expand infrastructure while maintaining cohesion. Population management remains critical. To rapid growth constrain food, water, and shelter. To slow growth risks genetic bottlenecks and loss of skilled personnel. Governance structures must balance authority, expertise, and community participation. Leaders coordinate resource allocation, technical operations, and conflict resolution, ensuring that critical tasks such as agriculture, water management, and construction are completed efficiently. Social cohesion is maintained through shared rituals, education, and cultural practices that reinforce a common identity while allowing for adaptation to new environmental conditions. Disputes over land, resources, or priorities are inevitable. Mechanisms for mediation and arbitration are essential to prevent factionalism and violence. Psychological well-being remains a priority. Individuals who have spent their lives on the ship may experience anxiety, fear, or resistance to new responsibilities, requiring mentorship, counseling, and structured integration into the colony. Education continues to play a central role. New generations must acquire technical, social, and ecological knowledge to maintain and expand the settlement. Skills must be redundantly distributed across the population to ensure resilience against attrition or accidents. Environmental adaptation is ongoing. Crops must be optimized for local soil and climate. Shelters must withstand weather extremes, and water and energy systems must be sustainable and reliable. Colonists must also anticipate long-term changes, including resource depletion, population growth, and evolving social dynamics. Decision-making frameworks must be flexible to adapt to unforeseen challenges while preserving stability and cohesion. Over generations, cultural evolution shapes norms, values, and priorities, influencing social hierarchy, cooperation, and innovation. Leaders must guide this evolution to balance tradition with adaptation, ensuring that the colony remains resilient and capable of sustained survival. The long-term success of the planetary settlement depends on integrating technological, ecological, and social systems while maintaining trust, cooperation, and purpose across generations. Stability is not automatic. It is continuously earned through governance, education, and shared commitment to the collective mission, demonstrating that the challenges of civilization extend far beyond physical survival into the realms of culture, ethics, and social engineering. Chapter 39: Intergenerational Responsibility on a Generation Ship and its Eventual Planetary Settlement. Every action carries consequences across centuries. Individuals live, work, and reproduce knowing that their decisions affect not only their own lives but the survival and well-being of countless future generations. This intergenerational responsibility is a defining feature of long-term space colonization. Education, governance, and technical expertise must be meticulously transmitted. Errors, negligence, or gaps in knowledge can cost decades, jeopardizing life support systems, food production, or social stability. Individuals inherit the consequences of prior generations' choices, from engineered reproduction programs to resource allocation and technological priorities, and they in turn must act with foresight to preserve stability and viability for those yet unborn. Ethical dilemmas are inherent, balancing personal freedom against collective survival, choosing who receives scarce resources, and enforcing population or reproductive policies. Decisions that ensure survival may limit autonomy, cause resentment, or provoke social tension, yet failing to act decisively can imperil entire communities. Psychological adaptation also intersects with responsibility. Individuals must reconcile the monotony and confinement of their lives with the understanding that their efforts sustain a civilization spanning generations. Purpose and meaning are anchored in contribution, maintaining systems, educating successors, and fostering social cohesion are not tasks, but existential imperatives. Cultural practices, rituals, and storytelling embed values of responsibility, cooperation, and endurance, reinforcing identity and continuity. Technological maintenance is inseparable from human decision-making. Systems degrade over centuries. Knowledge loss can compound errors, creating vulnerabilities. Redundant training, documentation, and mentorship are essential to prevent the erosion of skills critical to survival. Intergenerational accountability shapes governance as well. Leaders must consider not only immediate outcomes, but the long-term implications of policy, ensuring that structures, procedures, and social norms endure without creating oppression, instability, or inequity. In this environment, legacy is tangible. Every repair decision, unless unlearned, contributes to the continuity of life, technology, and society. The success of a generation ship or planetary colony is measured not solely by immediate survival, but by the ability of successive generations to thrive, adapt, and preserve the mission, highlighting that the responsibility of each individual is both moral and existential, binding the past, present, and future in an unbroken chain across the stars. Chapter 40. The Eternal Question: Would you board? After centuries of preparation, travel, adaptation, and survival, the final question becomes deeply personal. Would you choose to board a generation ship, knowing that you may never see the destination? From the perspective of those born aboard, life is a continuum of work, maintenance, education, and social navigation, all in service of a goal set centuries earlier. Sacrifice is not abstract, it is lived experience. The decisions, struggles, and successes of ancestors shape the conditions of your birth, your skills, and your environment. The voyage demands complete trust in systems, leadership, and fellow crew members, with every misstep potentially catastrophic. Upon arrival, challenges continue: adaptation to gravity, alien ecosystems, unknown pathogens, and the psychological strain of stepping onto a planet whose environment is simultaneously promising and hostile. Ethical dilemmas persist, from population management to governance, resource allocation, and intergenerational responsibility. Even with perfect planning, unforeseen hazards, cultural drift, and technological limitations can jeopardize survival. Yet, the mission embodies the essence of human ambition, exploration, endurance, and the desire to extend civilization beyond a single world. Boarding a generation ship means committing to life as a link in a century-spanning chain, embracing confinement, uncertainty, and the unknown. It is a choice between personal freedom and collective legacy, between the known comforts of Earth and the promise of humanity's expansion across the cosmos. The question resonates deeply because it confronts the values of autonomy, sacrifice, and purpose. Are we willing to trade individual experience for the survival and flourishing of countless generations? Would you risk everything for the continuation of the species, or prioritize freedom and immediate self-determination? There is no right answer. The dilemma is the mission itself. In considering these questions, we confront the core of what it means to be human, to explore, and to weigh personal desire against collective destiny. The generation ship is more than a vessel. It is a mirror of humanity's ambitions, fears, and ethical boundaries, challenging each of us to reflect on what we value most and what we are willing to sacrifice to reach the stars.